The new iPhones have been announced. This is the product that was really built specifically for artificial intelligence, Apple Intelligence, if you will. This has been a big driver of the stocks run up over the past year or so. Stocks up about 22% in the past year and 27% in the past 6 months as I'm recording. But was that run up in shares justified? And that's what I want to dig into today. Because if you look at the new announcement for the iPhone 16 and the 16 Pro, it's pretty unimpressive. There were incremental improvements across the board. The chips get better every year. The battery life supposedly got a little bit better. There's going to be software improvements, but these phones are not going to be shipping with Apple Intelligence. That was supposed to be the big seller for the iPhone 16. So that's going to come out more like a trickle later on this year and then into 2025. And at the same time, Apple's revenue is on the decline. And the company has obviously been leaning into the services business for years. But if you look at their iPhone revenue, that is really the alarming thing for Apple. And where shares are trading today, as I'm recording, 33 times earnings. That is a very expensive stock when your core business is not growing. So is this going to be the moment that Apple's going to be able to turn around that growth in the iPhone? I have my doubts, but that's what I want to dig into today. My name's Travis Hoium. Thanks for watching Asymmetric Investing. Please subscribe here on YouTube for all my content. And thanks to this video sponsor, The Motley Fool. If you go to fool.com/ASYM, they'll give you their top 10 stocks to buy right now. So let's get to a bit of the announcement and then put it into context with how Apple and the iPhone specifically has been performing over the last few years. This is the new iPhone. You just saw the actual big improvement here, which is a camera button. It's going to be down on the side. You're going to be able to adjust some of the camera settings without actually touching the touchscreen. So that's a really interesting advancement, but that's actually the biggest announcement with the iPhone 16. So I'm not going to do a review here. That's not what this channel is for. Marquise Brownlee did a great review if you want to look at that. I want to look at a couple of other things. So this is the iPhone 15. What they do is they always get rid of the Pro model and they just keep the iPhone 15. They still have the iPhone 14. So let's look at some of the improvements or additions that they're going to have with iPhone 16. So you obviously get Apple Intelligence. I mentioned that it's not actually going to come out later this month when these phones launch. You do get a new chip, the A18. They're moving up from the A16. That is because of a process change at Taiwan Semiconductor. So that's the reason that they skipped over 17. There's this new camera control button. Notice that this camera control button is the third thing that they highlight with the iPhone 16. So this is one of the top 3 things that they want you to know. If you're going to spend money on an iPhone 16, look, you get this camera control. That's great. It's going to be a really nice feature. But is this the kind of thing that people are going to run out and buy a new iPhone for? That's something to really question. The cameras look very similar to last year on the Pro model, changed a little bit with just the shape on the regular model. And then you get this battery improvement, which is what they say 33 hours for the iPhone Pro. And then the iPhone 16 regular gets an extra hour versus a year ago. That's really it. That's the big changes. The other thing to note here is these price points. If you are an Apple investor and you're watching iPhone revenue drop, one of the things that Apple can do is they can increase their prices. And I think they could have done that this year, but they're not. They're keeping the 16 Pro price at $999 and the 16 price at $799. There's obviously advancements that you can make from that, make it a little bit more expensive, but we're not going to see a 5-10% improvement in the average sale price for iPhones. And I think that is going to be a drag on iPhone revenue. So let's dig into those numbers. Thanks to our friends at The Motley Fool for sponsoring this video. Visit fool.com/ASYM for the top 10 stocks to buy right now. This first chart I'm going to show is iPhone revenue. That is the blue column. I've also included the installed base. You can see that installed base grows over time. That's a big reason that services revenue is growing, which I'll cover in just a second. But notice on the right-hand side of this chart, since 2022, and their fiscal year ends in September 2022, their revenue for iPhones has been declining for almost 2 full years now. One of the bull cases, one of the reasons that Apple stock is up over the past year is because of these artificial intelligence and Apple Intelligence features that are going to be coming out. I think a lot of people thought, hey, that's going to cause a new refresh cycle. So there's going to be more people buying new iPhones and potentially at a higher price. So we now know they're not going to be at a higher price. And the question that I think everyone needs to ask is, are people actually going to upgrade their iPhones? Is there a reason to buy an iPhone 16 versus having a 15 or a 14? even down to like something like an iPhone 12. And I think just look at some of the reviews. I think a lot of the reviewers are basically saying there's not really a great reason to upgrade unless you want access to these Apple Intelligence features. And again, those are not going to be out for a little while. So are we going to continue to see iPhone revenue decline? I think that is ultimately the fear for investors. Now, what is going well at Apple? The services revenue is really the driver of Apple over the past 6 or 7 years. So you can see that that has grown at a compound annual growth rate of 16.8% since fiscal 2017. Gross profit up 22% on the compound annual growth rate, now accounting for $68.4 billion worth of gross profit. So phenomenally profitable business. But what is going to happen with Apple services revenue as some of these new features comes out? It is very possible that something like Apple Intelligence, which is going to simply answer your questions for you, whether you're typing them in or whether you're using Siri, is going to mean that you're going to be doing fewer Google searches on Apple devices. Why is that important? Because part of this services revenue, about $20 billion of that $93 billion in revenue, comes from Google. They share advertising revenue with Apple. That is a pure profit business for Apple because they don't have to build their own search engine. They just incorporate Google into their software. So do you now start using Apple Intelligence, which means Apple's going to have to include better chips. They're going to have to include more RAM on those chips. That means the hardware is going to be more expensive. And again, they're not increasing the price of that hardware. Also, they're building out these data centers to do kind of the edge cloud compute, those simple questions that maybe you can't do on device, but you can do in the Apple cloud. That is going to be handled by Apple, but that is specific servers that they are building specifically for Apple Intelligence. Again, that it becomes a cost center replacing a revenue center. So it is very possible that revenue starts to slow and profits start to slow in the services revenue. And if that's not offset by people buying more iPhones and buying more expensive iPhones, that's how you get negative financials for Apple. And that is important because this stock is relatively expensive. You can see here from this chart, the price to sales multiple and the price to earnings multiple have both expanded pretty rapidly over the past few years. This goes back to that 2017 annual year that I talked about earlier, but the compound annual growth rate of the price to sales multiple is 14% and price to earnings multiple is 10%. Now shares are trading for nearly 9 times sales and 33 times earnings. So very expensive stock for a stock that the growth story is not really intact anymore. And I think that's what investors need to think about. Warren Buffett is selling shares of Apple stock. Why is he selling? Because growth is slowing and the stock is expensive. Does this product, does iPhone 16 change anything about that story, about the trajectory of the business? Fundamentally, I don't think it does. And that's what was really disappointing about the iPhone 16 announcement yesterday, because I don't think there's going to be a lot of catalysts for people actually buying new iPhones, and they're definitely not going to be doing it at a higher price. So those are my thoughts from an investment perspective on what's going on at Apple today. I think the company has kind of lost its mojo. It's lost the thread of growth and the excitement that it used to bring to the tech industry. But let me know what you think in the comment section below. Don't forget to subscribe to Asymmetric Investing. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you here next time.